This could be. Well, hello, Mike Paciello.
Steve Faulkner, so good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, it's always good to see you, as always.
Yeah.
So today we're just going to have a chat about what you're doing, um, where you see things are going in the industry, uh, where it's a positive for people with disabilities, and where it may not be a positive for people with disabilities.
Mm.
Well, I'll start by saying I don't know about you, but I, I think you have a similar view, but that accessibility for me is about making things or helping others to make things, make digital, sort of like user interfaces more accessible to people with disabilities. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
well,
may not always.
you and I are on the same page there, except for one thing, and I've been saying this for many years, decades now, literally. I don't think that we can separate accessibility from usability. You got to have the two of them, and because something is accessible doesn't necessarily mean that the
Yeah,
interface is usable. Or conversely, just because you've got some UX Don Norman, Jacob Nielsen types behind saying, "Hey, this is usable and the user experience is good," doesn't mean it's usable to people with disabilities. And I think fundamentally we have to keep beating that message into everywhere, the world.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I agree with that, but as you say, the accessibility, usability, they're like sort of siblings, aren't they? And they're sort of intertwined. But as far as the accessibility conformance is concerned or not, it's very much about people with disabilities. It's not. I'm not trying to make the web and applications accessible to all, because that's the job of the people that actually develop the stuff, and that's the mainstream.
Right,
It's more about the people on the edges, the people in the cheap seats,
right.
so to speak, that need that support.
Agreed. Totally agree.
It's I understand why people will say, it helped lay the curb cut, helps everyone, helps, and that's great. Helps mothers and with babies and things like that. But it's still I'm not out there to try to make life easier for other people.
Yeah.
I'm out there to try to make life a bit easier for people with disabilities.
And when you say that, are you, because I know I have a challenge because I think some people misinterpret I don't know, my career, my life intent, so to speak. But do you find that some people will come to you and ask you about the build environment and, like you said, the curb cuts and how do we, what do we need to do to make elevators and bathrooms and buildings more accessible? I get people that come and ask me those questions. I said, my brother is a building inspector, and he is an expert in that area, in making buildings and streets and what have you, the build environment, the brick and mortar environment accessible. I'm not. I know it. I understand what it is because the principles are still the same, right?
Yeah.
Um, but when it comes to where my heart lies and where my experience, so to speak, is, it's in the digital world.
Well,
And,
yeah. I
and
mean,
that's where I really focusing on accessibility.
well, yeah. I very much agree with that. But also that I have some expertise, or I know some things about particular aspects of accessibility, very much the technical, how it's implemented in browsers and how it works with assistive technology. If
Right,
somebody comes to me and asks me something that I don't know, I don't pretend to know what I don't know.
right.
You know,
Yeah,
and I think that in some ways that I've had the luxury of working in environments where I've always just worked with a great multidisciplinary team of people that have, have the experience and understanding and skills to be able to answer those questions. And so
Yeah,
I'll refer them to somebody else. I mean, one of my favorite things to say is that I'm not an expert, but I know some people who are. So,
exactly.
and
Yep, I hear you. I think I fall into the same category.
yeah,
Especially the last 30 years, most of my experience, so to speak, has been more from, a business development standpoint, and you hire folks or work with folks around. I mean, TPG was the essence of that, right?
well, that's
TPG
why
was the
I
essence
want
of,
to ask her, well, to delve into that a little bit,
yeah,
because one of the things that, you and Charlie and Debs were the best bosses I've ever had. Now I'm a boss. Um, I try to remember the lessons that I learned from you, and in particular you, because you were sort of like the how would I put it? You were sort of like the guiding light of the company in regards to accessibility. And what I did note is that you always seem to get that, like you seem to have a an eye out for people with talent and people that had the right stuff to
yeah,
to work in accessibility. But you did that, but then you didn't um you didn't try to impose your views upon them. Your this is the way you must do it. Somebody like me, for example. I mean, you guys just let me, you know, do what I do,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I very much appreciated that.
That was, very, very early on, and maybe some people don't know this, but my original company was actually WebAble. And long story short, the initial parts of WebAble as a business started just with me as being the expert and some other people doing the business part of it. And then we got during this is during the dot-com boom area, right? Early 90s when I was in it. And I got approached by a major investor, a very, very large investment firm. They brought me in and they brought in the guy who was functioning at that time as the president of webable.com, right?
Yeah,
And long story short, they pushed him out, or they actually had meetings with me separately and said, look, this guy's not the guy you want. What you need are people around you that understand law, understand accounting, understand business development, understand all the things that make up a business. You're the centerpiece because you're the face of this company. So we'll build it around you, but you need to understand. And this was my first real lesson in business. And that is their advice to me was surround yourself with the experts. Let them listen to them, let them work your business, they'll create it and you'll be successful. And I always use that as a fundamental principle. That's how I ended up with Deb doing all of our finance and accounting, right? And bringing her in as a partner. That's how we ended up with Charlie. And really, Charlie's brother, Richard, in the background, who was really a true entrepreneur. And that's how we ended up with you, right? And then we just started filling all the gaps with my goal was to build a company with the best experts in the world, not in the US, not in Canada, not North America, in the world. And I felt like at its highest point, at its apex, we did. We
yeah,
did.
we
We
definitely
had the
did.
best in the world. I can't
Yeah,
think of one or I can't think. And we had a couple of situations where it didn't quite work out with an individual, but that was very, very few and far between.
yeah. I know, but also what I found is that you and all of you, the executive team at TPG, um, tried their best to help people get over any impediments, any barriers they had. You
Yeah,
didn't just throw people on the scrap heap because, you work with them, and that,
yeah,
very was important to me as well.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I don't know if you recall, but I remember the day that you told us that the company was being sold, and
yeah,
I understand the reasons why, but I cried like for the rest of the day. I mean, really, really, because what we had. and we still have to an extent. What we had was really important to me, and though that group of people was really important to me.
Yeah, let me tell you something. You cried that day, but I cried for a month leading up to it.
I
It was
believe you.
really, really hard. And a lot of people know it was my Kim was dying, and
Yeah,
I had to. And I'm glad, as hard as that was, it was the right decision at the right time. It was the best decision because it gave me nearly 2 years from that time, 2.5 years actually, to be able to stay and take care of her full time. And that's what I did. That's all I did for that 2.5 years. I did little things on the outside to, stay
yeah,
involved, but my whole life was dedicated to her, helping her through. And when she passed, that was tough too. But I was glad that I did what I did.
yeah. Well, you made the right decision for your family. I mean, and that's one of my guiding principles as well. I think that that is the same with the this company Tetralogical that I'm a pioneer of. Is that we always put people before, the people that we work with. We say, look after yourself, look after your family.
Yeah, we always did that. How many times did we talk about that? In our
Exactly.
group meetings, team meetings, on one-on-one meetings, we always said, family first. Take care of your
Yeah.
family. And the other thing I thought that we did a really good job doing, and really this was with Charlie and Deb and myself. We were kind of like the triune of the company, always talking to one another, is what can we do to help so and so? They're really struggling, they're going through a difficult time. We don't have to make a big deal about it, but what can we do? And
Yeah.
all three of us were on, always, always on the same page, always.
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking back, and I don't think that that you're ever making huge amounts of money, but you always made sure that we got to, see sun or wherever. And it was, and we always had those meetups as well. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a really important part of company cohesion and just, being able to look at somebody and the people you work with remotely, just be able to look them in and have a beer with them or have a coffee and just talk.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
really important. So yeah, I
Those were
mean,
important. Yeah.
it was a really positive part
And we
of
had some good times. We had some fun times.
yeah,
There are experiences that took place I'll never forget. You know
yeah,
it. I know it. I mean, you
yeah,
and I had more than a couple of interactions, some things, and they're tucked away as memories that I'll never forget. And I've said this to others. I've said this, to my sons and whatnot, who are both two of the three of them are obviously in our business as well. So I love that legacy. I'm very proud of Shane and Kyle,
yeah,
and what they've done. But I will tell you, the 16 years of TPG at the level when I was there was by far and away the greatest professional experience I've ever had in my life. Since then and before then. I've had great experiences. I've been very, very lucky, which is probably the best word to use for that. Very, very lucky, very, very fortunate with a lot of things that have happened in my career in that even today. But nothing, nothing will replace those 16 years of TPG. Nothing. Just won't.
yeah. Well, it was a major time, and I was there a bit longer than you because I continued on.
Yeah.
And I still enjoyed myself because there was a lot at the time I was there for the most part. There were a lot of the same people, and then slowly over time that people left or people found different positions or whatever. And it's like I mean, there's still some people there that I really feel.
Yeah. David's still there, right?
Yeah,
Matt's there. I guess Justin's no longer there. I
no,
just talked to him about it at CSUN. Hans is still there,
yeah. I
right?
was talking to Hans yesterday. He's coming over to Europe in June, and
Good.
yeah, hopefully we'll be able to meet up with him because yeah, well, Hans and I start on the same day, so we
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he put up with me for 17 years, so I mean I can't say much. So
What a team! What a team! I mean,
yeah,
really, you can go through. It's a who's who of accessibility. When you really, I can't think of anyone on the team. Cedric is probably the least known,
yeah,
right? I
it's
mean,
still
and he
going
was
great guns.
instrumental. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
we
was
just had
really
just
happy when
awesome.
I heard that Cedric had got a position working at, is it Temesis?
I is that where he is? I think I did hear something like I didn't know who it
Yeah,
was.
yeah, he's at Temesis, but didn't really, because we used to use some of their, yeah, I can't
We
remember the guy, the main guy's name, but
we never actually we played with it a little bit. We did a little work
we
with them,
didn't
but in
use
the end,
their tools, but we did,
yeah,
we had their help desk.
yeah, that's right. That's what it
Yeah,
was. Yeah,
which was
yes,
a major
yeah,
millstone around the neck, but they're nice.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, but he's there, and what
Good.
I'm really pleased to see is that he is continuing. He's built a new version of the color conscious analyzer.
Oh,
Uh,
he did. I didn't know that either. Great.
yeah, I mean it's there's a public repo. It's all
I'll have to go back and look at it. Yeah.
yeah, but he's building
But
his
he's the
lab.
lead. He's probably of all of the entire team, and yet he came with Charlie. So there was me, then Charlie and,
Yep,
and Cedric, and then you, and then Hans. Right?
yep.
I mean, Deb was there
Or
with me as
Jez.
well.
Jez
What's
was
that?
there.
And Jez. Oh, that's right. And Jez too. Yeah, one
Jez
of my
came a
best.
few months before me because
Yeah,
I was wanted to move, to the UK, and you wanted to like get some. I said, well, have a look at this guy, Jez, because Jez
yeah,
was, was the bee's knees when it came to accessibility stuff. He still is, but he's very, he doesn't. He's one of those people that doesn't put himself out publicly as I do now, and
yeah.
you still do.
But he is
But yeah,
brilliant.
yeah, I mean, and that's why he works. Well, I work closely with him because I don't actually manage Jez, but I look after the assessments
Okay.
at Technological, and so I work closely with Pat and with Jez and with the whole. I do a lot of QA, so yeah, it's still in some ways, as you know, quite a few of the people I used to work with under you
Yeah,
and Debs and Charlie, and
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's
It's awesome.
yeah. I mean, we've taken those people on because they're very good
Yeah,
and they know
yeah,
their
yeah,
shit and they're in it for the right reasons. That's the
yep.
important thing.
It's all about their hearts. It's
Yeah,
all about their hearts. These are, and I mean every single person that worked at TPG. It was all about their hearts. They were fully dedicated. They're fully invested. They're very empathic towards individuals with disabilities, and that's something I'm very grateful for. Every single person,
yeah.
even Carl and Adrian.
Even Carl and Adrian. Um, yeah, and well, as you know, I've spoken to both Carl and Adrian
Yeah,
on the fireside recently, but and I saw Carl, like, I bump into Carl at conferences or whatever, like see somebody I didn't actually go, but I got a lovely picture I'll show you later, but it was that because I had serious FOMO about not being at CSUN this year, and
yeah.
I contacted Adrian and said, send me pics, and the first one he sent was a selfie of him with Carl standing next to him, flipping me the bird. It's
Yeah,
perfect.
that's the prize. That's the prize. But I
Yeah,
mean, that's look, those guys are great guys who really know their stuff. I love and miss them both. I run into them. I bump into them. I saw them both at CSUN, and yeah, they're good guys. And of course, Carl, the girls. I love the girls. We have known them since I still have Carl's girls made some crayon pictures, drawings for me that I had hanging up in my office all those years. So yeah, they're all
yeah.
they're
This
all we're all they're all good. Hey, we're all in it for the same reason by and large, and how what we do now is not it doesn't take away from anything that we're committed to as a
Exactly,
professional.
exactly.
Yeah,
What I'll do is I'll get on to the fireside now because
Okay.
that's it's just
Yeah, go for it.
okay. So you should be able to see now. Can you see?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can see. Yeah.
So, who's
Let's
the
see.
first person on the panel?
Yeah, that's David. That's Swallow. Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah. I remember David. I remember he was delivering a paper at a conference. Boy, I think it might have been when we were at Hetty's in Bristol or something, or York. Oh, it was at York, University of York, right? Helen
Yep.
Petrie was there. David graded a great paper there. I can't remember who came up to me and said, "Hey, we need to get Swallow. He's in there." It might have been David Sloan. So, yep, I
Well,
got
yeah.
him.
I
Love
mean,
him. Good
he did
guy.
a PhD. He's a doctor, of course.
Yep.
Doc Swallow, we call him.
Yeah.
And he did his PhD on web accessibility. So
Yeah.
he knows his stuff, but also he's a very close friend of mine. I love him. I love him to bits.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, and I'm happy to say that I will be seeing him in York because Tetralogical we're having a face-to-face in New York next month, and we usually have a social, and he'll be invited. But also, um, I'm pleased to say that one of the people that I work with, a guy called Joe Lammy who's a young guy who did his masters at York University, University of York, or whatever it's called, and
Yeah.
he's great because one of the the things that we've been able to do with Tetralogical is employ and people, younger people that are newish to the industry. So because obviously, I mean, look, I'm as old as well, I'm not as old as you,
Right.
but I'm old enough, and so it's not something I'm gonna continue to do. I I would like to think that once I stop making sense, I will I will stop. But I mean, really, I'll stop when I'll be able to get my my two daughters through their education.
Through
I
through college.
Yeah, well, yeah through university. I have to say that Clara, my oldest, she is will be finishing her degree, and she's graduating in July.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Tell her I said congratulations. Hey, Steve, I just want to let you know you cut out for about 5 seconds just a couple of minutes ago. So I didn't quite capture what it
Oh,
was
okay.
that you
Is that
said.
your
Yeah, I don't know
notated?
why this is. I don't know why that came in there. Oh,
Oh,
Otter.
okay.
I
Just
keep trying to deinstall it.
yeah,
And yeah, it just came in. I can't. Can you just exit them out?
yeah,
Just, yeah, just kill it.
yeah.
There you go. Okay, good. Yeah, sorry. I use that for
Okay.
some. I've had a couple of deaf folks and whatnot in there that needed it for one of the other pianos that I'm working on. So,
Yeah. Well, of course, that part of what I do before I publish the video is do all the captioning, so and provide
yeah,
a text transcript as well as the captions. So hopefully, the good thing is from my side is that there's not a lot of audio description that needs to be, we
yeah,
in general, the discussion, like we're talking about the Rogues Gallery now, and we've got these people. Um, but we're actually talking about them, so I don't need to actually add,
yeah.
you extra information. Uh,
Awesome. Next,
Next,
next would be Charles Pike.
Charles.
Charlie Pike. Yeah, one of
Yes.
my first real partner. Deb was there. Deb had already started with me doing some. She did a lot of the books, but in terms of technology, Charlie and I were working with each other. I think he actually reached out to me first. I can't recall, um, but very early on, we found some great synergy together. He was doing some projects at NYU,
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
I think that's how we got started there. But yeah, great friend to this day. He and his brother Richard are two very dear friends, and were very instrumental in making TPG the success that it was. The best thing I loved about Charlie, he has a little bit more of a laid back, less intense than I am.
Yeah.
And so he was great, but there were a couple of times when he got a little ornery.
Oh, really?
And
I've
yeah,
never,
yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah,
never seen Charlie Ornery. Well,
yeah,
I mean, I've
yeah.
ignored him for years.
Over certain subjects, there were a couple of things that I maybe ornery is not the right word. Maybe just firm
Yeah.
resolve. No. We got to do it this way, and for this reason. So, but I always appreciated his advice. And again, like I said earlier, I surrounded myself at TPG with the best of the best, and it started with Charlie and Deb.
I'm not saying that you surround yourself with really good people, good,
Yeah,
nice people, people that, like
yeah,
yeah, I've got nothing but praise for Charlie. I can't think of
yeah.
anything negative to say about him. But except he was my line manager or whatever for at some point, and I when I manage people, I think about the way he managed me, and I always describe his management style as homeopathic. It was sort of like almost non-existent, but he's still at Vispero now. So
Yeah, he's still there, right? Along with Hans,
yep.
and a couple of other people, but it's down to like, I don't know, 6 to 8 that were originally there with us. Man, I don't even know if it's that
Well,
much. I
they
mean,
got rid of Dennis. Um, what was he? Yeah, the sales
Denny,
guy.
yeah, I saw Denny at CSUN. I saw him at
Yeah, well,
CSUN.
he's landed on his feet though again, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's doing well. Yeah, a few folks had left, and
Yeah,
and are there. Yeah.
what's the name? What's the other guy? Brown. The you,
Brown. Oh, Travis? Are you thinking about
yes,
Travis?
Travis. Travis is
Yeah,
yes.
Travis is
Close.
actually working at Audio Eye now.
Oh,
Yeah,
hey.
yeah. That came up. I don't know. Last fall, I think. And
Oh, that's good. I'm glad that he's like.
yeah,
I'm glad that he's got work, because he's got a family and
yeah.
also he's got other challenges and so I'm really glad that he's found a place.
Yeah, he's doing good. I think he's enjoying it. The I know that the folks there really like him, and yeah, and he knows his stuff. I Travis brings into this company what this company's dying for, and that is experience. Really good, solid experience across the accessibility industry. And he's got that. Before he came with to us at TPG, he was at DQ.
Yeah,
So
yes,
he's got a lot of years into this. Good
like
guy.
Matt Feldman. I don't know
Yeah.
what's Matt's up to now, but he got the bullet as well.
Yeah. I talked to Matt too just before we brought on Travis, and I think Matt has gone in a different direction because his more. I'm not sure if he ended up with a nonprofit, but he was kind of looking in that
But
area.
he is, oh yeah. Well,
Yeah,
whatever work he gets, I'm pleased. But
yeah,
yeah, but Charlie, I mean, like you, like Debs, that I've known, I feel like I've known you for a large part of my life, and I knew Charlie, and Charlie was always a positive um, effect.
I
Had always had a positive effect. I remember going to they his family went off to Greece or something one year, and when my daughters were young and we went and stayed in his house. We had a family vacation in his house,
oh cool.
and it was lovely. I mean,
Yeah,
where he lives in County Wicklow is just a lovely place, but the scenery around there is incredible. So
he has a
interesting.
knack. He and Bergen have a knack. And I'm not sure if it's a combination of both of them, but every time Charlie we would go somewhere. Like you remember, we would go and have meetings in Florence, and we went
Yep.
to Budapest together. He has this incredible knack of finding great places to stay. And I remember being so envious of him when we were in Florence, and I was in a hotel with Sarah and Henny. It was downtown, and he had this beautiful place out overlooking what's the river there that we had to go across there. I forget the name of the river there. But it was just awesome. It was absolutely awesome, and he got it at half the cost for what we were paying for our rooms at a stupid hotel.
No.
Great, great
Yeah.
guy. He's a
Yeah.
world traveler.
He is a great guy. And the next person,
Shadi. Yeah.
yeah,
Shadi. Yeah. I know
Charlie
Shadi
was.
well. I have a meeting with Shadi, I think, later this week in the Amazon team.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
He's going to appear on the fireside at some point in the next
Cool.
month or two. But
Shadi is a great guy and really, really understands and knows the standards business. If
yeah,
there's one thing I don't like about him, and I'll say this and he can come back and tell me, he's too loyal to the organizations that he works with.
yeah.
His
Well,
loyalty outweighs his I think sometimes his affinity for what he's really good at, and that is understanding what people with disabilities, users with disabilities need for accessibility.
right. I know I've dealt with him mostly through the W3C, and it
Yeah,
continues because he's still an active participant in the Wake 3.
yep,
And same as Andrew Kirkpatrick
yep,
and others, and Greg Van der Heiden. Yeah. So there's plenty of long, people with a lot of experience that
yep,
continue to be involved.
yeah, yeah. Good guy, good
Yeah,
friend, good colleague.
yeah, he's one of the.
Definitely someone you want to have on your team for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely not. You don't want him as an enemy.
Yeah, yeah,
So the on last on the top row, we've got.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just
Kate on top,
yeah.
Leonie and Deb or
Yeah,
Debs.
I saw it like, because I go through all the pictures that
Yeah,
I've
thank you for making
like,
this easy for me. It wasn't too hard. There's
yeah,
only one
well,
of everybody there. There's only one person I'm still trying to figure out right now. But other than that, this makes it pretty. Because I saw, what was that? I think I saw the ones you put up for Adrian, and I think I only knew. I don't even think I knew half of the ones that were up there, and I'm not sure why. Or I would recognize faces, but I couldn't remember names. But at least
I mean, I
here I
forget
can.
people. Like I've had people on here on the Rose Gallery for people, and I can't remember their name.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes. So don't worry. It's not. It's really just to get conversations going.
But
I,
yeah, and you know how we were at TPG with our families and our kids. We were all raising kids. We all were raising kids, and so when Kate and Deb's got three daughters, Victoria, Kate, and oh boy, I can't remember the name of the third one. She'll probably get me for this. Uh, they would come into the office when they were 7, 8, 9 years old, right?
yeah,
And Kate now has two sons of her own,
I know.
and
Yeah,
married, and Deb is a happy grandma.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I still keep in touch with Debs, and
Yeah,
I had a email conversation with her just to recently say hi, and she always writes because she's like she never fails to send me will send a lovely Christmas postcard to us, like
yeah,
with her family on it, and she's always writing, things telling us what's going on. It's always, I I mean, I really miss having the opportunity to spend time with her.
yeah,
But who knows? Who knows what the future holds? But
yeah.
yeah, I really what I was going to say is that I just go through and look at it. I've got hundreds and hundreds of photos
I'm sure. Yeah,
because I make a point of taking photos when I go to conferences or wherever because it helps me to remember things. And I saw this photo. This was actually I think when we were in Orlando. I don't think you were there then. You
I,
left by
I,
this point.
no, I don't think so.
Yeah, but that was from Orlando. It's just such a lovely, picture of the three of them,
Yeah,
obviously smiling and
yeah,
happy.
yeah.
But yeah, they well, yeah,
Kay was our first. Kay was our first real HR person. HR
yep,
person.
and
Yep, she did a great
yeah,
job. She was wonderful to work with,
well,
and I
yeah,
know
well,
she cared about the entire team.
she did. She was very, yeah, she was great. I loved working with
Yeah,
Kate,
yeah.
and then she's very much like a mother. She's very nurturing, very caring.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Deb, I know Jez probably, if he'll listen, he'll say Deb, Deb's got her name from Jez because he
Ah,
thought that's
really?
what, yeah. You did not know that?
No, but
Deb's,
I still call her. I always call her Debs.
yeah, that's from Jez. Jez thought her name was Deb's instead of Deborah. And I can't remember how long it was. It was years before somehow he realized that it was Deb. I can't remember how that came about, but yeah, that's how we started calling her Debs. I've always had a hard time doing it because I just have always known Deb and I go back. A lot of people don't know this. Deb and I worked at Digital Equipment Corporation back in the early '80s together, and that's how we came together. Um,
Ah,
so there's a little bit of a story. I'm not sure how many of the even the old team knew that. So we go back almost my full career. I am pretty sure Deb was working in accounting at Digital and had started right around the same time that I had started DEC in 1982,
right.
81, 81.
Sorry,
So yeah,
just to go back to Shadi again. I just
yeah,
wanted to because he was obviously worked a long time within the WebEx initiative, and I wanted to get you to to give us a bit of background to how the WebEx accessibility initiative was formed at the W3C, and I know that you were involved in at least initially. Um,
yeah, yep. Right through WCAG 1.
yep,
I was there. So it was really kind of interesting. At the time, the web was out. Tim had released it to the world. And then Joe Harden's team at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, which of course that's where John Gunderson
yep,
was for many years, released the Mosaic browser, and that basically is what brought the GUI
yep.
to the web. Put that layer on it, and so folks like Greg Vanderheiden over at Trace, Larry Goldberg at NCAM, and myself, George Kirscher, a few others, we were really working on the accessibility of documentation, electronic docs, and somehow we got pulled into this. I can't remember what was the tip off, but at any rate, we all went to the second World Wide Web conference, which was held in Chicago. And we had a meeting with Daniel Dadier and with Jim Miller, who were there part of the W3C team. Tim was not in the original meeting. Tim did come on later on. But long story short, we started talking about accessibility. And basically between NCAM and Trace and a few other things that George and I were doing for ICAD, which was another organization, we put together what really was the fruitage of WCAG 1. So that gives you that notion, that draft. Then I'm working as a volunteer at MIT, which just was okay. Let me start pulling together people who have an interest in web and web accessibility.
Hmm.
So I did that as a volunteer, and then I got pinged by Jim Miller. I can't remember if Danielle was on that first call, but definitely was in every call after that.
Sorry, Jim Miller's not a name that I'm familiar with. Who?
Jim, yeah, you got to go back. Jim Miller goes back with Dave Raggett
Oh,
and
yeah.
and Hakan Lee
Mm.
and those names go back there. Joe Harden, Tim Berners-Lee. These are some of the original folks that were Robert Caillet were there. These are folks that I knew at the very early beginning. And Jim had one of the domains that he was in charge of, and I can't remember what the domain at the W3C was at that particular time. But he was there, and Jim also, I think he may have worked at Digital Equipment at one time, and so there was that. We had that relationship going. So anyway, we're creating this little, consortia,
Hmm.
just volunteer consortia. And one day Jim says to me, "Hey, Mike, Tim, I think it was just Tim at the time, but probably others were with him, had been meeting with President Clinton, Vice President Gore, some of the folks at the National Science Foundation, and the Department of Education. And long story short, the White House, the U.S. White House, wanted to put together some thing that was rooted and sourced and hosted at the W3C around web accessibility for people with disabilities. Um, and so they came to me and said, "Hey, you want to work with us? You want to help us put this thing together?" Excuse me. So I said, "Sure." Um, Ironically, I was the department at Digital Equipment that I was working for, which was Network Solutions, Ethernet and things along those lines. I was a
Hmm.
UX engineer at that time, was sold to Computer Associates. And Computer Associates really didn't have me working on anything. So I had this 6 month window. And basically what it came down to was Tim said, excuse me, go create a business plan and create this this entity. Let me take a drink.
Sure.
Trying to combine two stories at the same time. Go create this project within the W3C that deals with web accessibility. So Jim, Danielle, myself, we get some other help from a couple of other folks like Dave Raggett, especially at the HTML level, and some of the browser folks. Chris Wilson was still at NCSA at that time.
Wow. Yeah.
And actually so was believe it or not, so was what's his name that founded Netscape. Uh,
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking
you know what
about.
I'm talking about. Yeah, it's funny. Anyway, these were all kids in college at that time.
Yeah.
But they worked with us and we did some good work. So we created this thing called the Web Access Project, WAP. That's what it was. And I said, so Danielle and I spent, I think, a day or two. And I said, look, we can't call this the WAP or web. This is because we were planning on launching this whole thing in 97. So I worked on all the work. We put all the business plan together, got it all vetted by the W3C, by their executive councils and whatnot. Tim bought into it. We got funding from MIT, from Department of Ed and National Science Foundation, and from Tide in Europe. So 3 years of funding built into this thing. And the timing couldn't have been better because it was right around the next major release of HTML, which was, I think, 3.1, maybe 3.2 at that particular time. So all of these things are going on at the same time. So I'll tell you two stories, try to get through this real quickly. One was Danielle and I said, we got to come up with another name. So I spent one night, literally one whole night. Oh, it was 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and it came to me. WAI, Web Accessibility Initiative. So I ran it by him. I said, look, we could use this. This will be great. We could do this for marketing. When we launch this, there'll be all kinds of ways that we can use it. And that's how we settled on that name. Jim agreed to it. Tim liked it. Um, and so that's how Web Accessibility Initiative came about. The challenge was at that time, um, Netscape, and I don't mind calling these guys out, and their rep did not want accessibility to be embedded into the HTML specification that was about to be released.
Right.
There was that problem. And the other problem was the US government wanted to announce this because this is 1996 and an election year. and they wanted to turn it into a platform for them. And we all agreed, Tim, Jim, myself, this is not a national thing. This is international. We're not going to release this year. So whatever we do, we're going to do in 1997. So that was another big thing, that big decision that came out of it. So the launch would have been and was at Santa Clara at Stanford, hosted by Stanford in April of 97. And the HTML specification was the next big thing. How do we get accessibility acknowledged and get buy-in from Netscape? So I had established a relationship with the White House with Tom Khalil, who was, I think he was at the time, the assistant director of science and technology at the White House under Vice President Gore. In in a conversation I had with Tom, because I was also in the middle, I just started writing my book. Tom said, anytime you ever need anything, you ever want to have a meeting here at the White House, let me know. I'll get us in. So Netscape is fighting the spec. I say, hey, I bet if we call a meeting of all the people who are in support of accessibility and spec at the White House, suddenly Netscape will buy in. And I put out an invitation. I said, you have to commit to supporting accessibility and the HTML specification, or you can't come. It's plain and simple. You can't come. They were the first ones to respond. The first ones to respond. So we got that through. We launched the Web Accessibility Initiative in April. Long story short, I was at that time the executive director of the Yuri Rubinsky Insight Foundation, another great story to talk about. And eventually we went and we hired an executive director, and that was Judy Brewer. So there you go. That's a very quick version of how that all came about.
So was it Brendan Ike you were talking about that was in Netscape, or was
Say that again.
I was thinking that it may have been Brendan Ike?
No, no, no. Who was the founder of Netscape? He's a big entrepreneur. He's got his own venture capital firm. Geez, his name's right on the tip of my
Jim
tongue.
Clark,
No, not Clark.
Mark Anderson,
Mark, yeah, it was Anderson, because
Andreessen.
Anderson was one of the original developers at NCSA, along with Chris Wilson and I think Tim Koskoff, who eventually went to Spyglass. So all three of those guys were college students, post grad, I think, when I was there, and we were talking about accessibility then under Joseph Harden. That's how I
So,
remember that.
so that's how. Is there like uh, is the history of the way the formation of the way, is it documented somewhere? Like, is it?
There is, yes, there is, and Danielle is the one that put it up there. I've read the whole thing, and it's exactly as he describes it. He says a couple of things, he thinks this or that, and it was more or less that way. I have a
I
link. I
just
can send you the
I like
link.
to, because one of the things I do is when I publish the
Yeah,
chat, I put some references and things in for people.
yeah. I'll send you.
So
I'll send you the link. It is definitely up there. It's on the W3C site.
excellent.
Yeah.
Uh, so as well
And
as
so Shadi and Judy came. I don't remember how soon after Judy was hired as the executive director, but Shadi came in not too long after that. So that would have been maybe 97,
wow,
98-ish.
yeah, so he was there for a long time.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. Um, so as well as being involved in the early days, or being involved in the formation of Y, you were also, one of the other things that I remember that you were involved in was you were chair of the Section 508 refresh.
Yep, that's right. I was on the, excuse me, there were actually three versions of Section 508. The first version hardly anyone knows because it was almost all hardware. I think it was associated with the Computer Accommodations Act. Then there was Section 508, the first version, in which Jim Thatcher
Yeah.
and Larry Scadden were the chairs. And I worked under Larry Scadden. Jim was working on some of the other technical things. I worked on documentation in that first committee. And then the refresh committee came about and the Access Board approached myself and our good friend and colleague who's since passed away, one of my best friends ever, Jim Tobias, and
Yeah.
we were both co-chairs
I didn't know
of
that
that.
Jim had passed, but
About it was shortly after COVID, so maybe 2021. I remember Kieran Pell Strauss and I were, it might have been even 2022. We were both at the M Enabling conference, and she came up to me and she said, "I just heard that Jim Tobias passed away." And I said, I personally have been trying to call him and contact him and got no response. And so I have heard rumors of, that it may have been Alzheimer's and things like that.
yeah,
I don't know exactly how, but he did pass away. Yeah, what a great Jim Thatcher and Jim Tobias are maybe two of the greatest minds, literally. People who are, not only I can say I'm just very, very proud and humbled to have worked with, but these are two of the greatest minds ever in terms of accessibility ever.
yeah. I think that people like Jim Thatcher's been gone for a while now, isn't he? But I during the early days, Jim was one of those people that
Yep.
you know he was a leading light, and
Yeah.
but also I've read stuff about how like he developed stuff, and he worked at IBM, did he?
He worked for um, Bell Labs. Bell Labs.
Right.
Yeah. Thatcher worked for IBM. Jim worked for Bell Labs. Yeah, and he was in research and development and telecommunications. Like that's how he got, knew Larry Goldberg and Carabel Strauss so well, and all the folks at that level. And he's
Yeah.
just brilliant, just a brilliant engineer, absolutely brilliant. I will tell you briefly, if you have a second,
Of
one
course.
of the interesting things about he and I when we were approached by the Access Board, David Capozzi, and Larry Rolfe, who was the executive director of the Access Board at that time. We were shocked. Both of us, we are just two little guys. TPG was barely, up and around and doing anything. In fact, I think I actually am in there under WebAble. If you look back on it, and Jim was still at Bell Labs, but I think he had gone off and started his own Inclusive Technologies, yeah, his own business. And they called us, and we went down, and they said, "We want you guys because, you're well respected. We believe that you'll be able to keep everyone else in order, and there were going to be a lot of significant players." And so Jim and I agreed that he would be kind of the lead, and I would be the backup. Long story short, a lot of big corporations and organizations did not like Jim. They did not want him there, and they gave him such a hard time through the first couple of meetings, a real hard time, and to the point where he's going to quit. And I
Right.
said, "No way! I need you are the technical brains of this operation. So I'll lead the meetings because I'm good at leading organization, getting people to talk and keep things in order. You do all the technical stuff, and then we'll work together." So we switched roles, and it worked like a peach. Worked great. And
Really.
when people needed to be told, sit down and be quiet, and I won't name names, but there were a few of our colleagues and friends that were there, well-respected colleagues, that I had to pull them off and
Yeah.
say, "You're talking too much. You're not really listening, and your ideas may be good, but they're not great. So listen to everybody else."
That's one of the things that I mean, I'm involved in the accessibility guidelines working group meetings that are largely about WCAG 3 now.
Yeah,
And I I tend to say very little because I haven't been involved. Like I took myself out of the standards work for a while after I had a bit of burnout after doing HTML5 and all of that. But
right.
so and I so but I have been getting more involved again, and but I sit there and I listen a lot because I think that's the best way to actually, have informed opinions about things. And if I've got something to say, I will say it. But
Yeah.
you know, but what I find is that there's a number of people that take up all the air in the room. Take up all the oxygen. Not naming names, but
Yeah.
there's
Some
some
people just
people
like to
that,
hear their voice.
yeah, but there's some people that would do better just to listen a bit more than actually, because also there's loads of people. I mean, it's a well attended. The weekly meetings are well attended, but you don't hear from a lot of the people
Yeah.
because
Yep.
because they can't get a word in edgeways at the best times, and but I will say, I mean, the current chair's Alistair Campbell, who was well, he still works at Nomensa, but now it's been bought by another company. It's called Gain. He, well, he was one of the founders in Nomensa,
Right. Where
and
Leone came from,
yeah, and
right? When she came
Rachel
to TPG. Yeah.
Bradbury,
Yeah.
and there's a new co-chair, a guy called Adam something. I can't remember. But it's a bloody hard job. That's all I can say. Trying to move things forward, especially with like the scope of Wake 3 is vast, just like the scope of Wake 2 was. But trying to rewrite or change the whole concept, the conceptual structure of the guidelines is a mammoth task, and
Yep.
trying to herd the people into actually, I couldn't do it because I mean a lot of the time I just keep my mouth shut because I'd be telling people to fuck off. Sorry to put it bluntly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it just so I just say nothing is done. I find that silence is the best
Yeah.
way. But those people and saying that Andrew Kirkpatrick was chair during Waco too. I mean, it's not a job that it's a very enviable sort of. No, it's not enviable.
You need to have the right temperament for it. You
Yes,
really do. Yeah.
yeah,
And because you're right, and I'll readily admit there were nights when we would go home and my head hurt,
mm,
literally, right? And then I have to sort everything out in my mind. But both Jim and I were very committed to getting this thing through. And look, we had, we had 2 years to put this whole thing together. That was the charter. We did what we did in 19 months, and the only thing that we did not finish, literally the only, and I wanted to, I was all ready to move forward those last 3 or 4 months just to get it done, was the intersection, the interoperability between AT and IT. That was huge at that particular time. And everybody at that table, by and large, were tired. Even Jim was tired. And I said, come on, we've got 3 or 4 more months of this charter. Let's push through this, but we never did. And so interoperability, while it was a theme, along with harmonization, so we were able to harmonize a lot of the standards that were out there that existed at that particular time, and usability. Um, those were kind of the foundation stones of the 508 refresh. We could have done better. We could have done better.
yeah.
I wish that we had, but at least we've left something more work for others to do.
Yeah, well, it was a lot better than than the original 508.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's
Yep.
it's about it's about incremental improvement. That's all we
Right.
can, hope and for.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just get back to the I don't know what art's there. Okay, so moving swiftly on, not
How
too
about if I do this? I'm going to name the ones that I know, then you could ask me whatever questions, and then you got to tell me the one person I don't know. So you got
sure.
Jared Smith from
Yep.
WebAIM, you got Billy Gregory,
Yep.
you've got Cedric, and you've got Johnny. but I can't think
Okay,
of what
so the person that you don't know is a guy called James Edwards, aka Brother Cake, aka Simply Pastry.
I
Um,
think I've seen his posts on LinkedIn, maybe.
yeah, so
Yeah.
James is we the presumption is he passed away, but um, just recently.
Oh yeah, I saw this from who just posted that out there?
Well, Ian and Ricky,
Ian did, right.
yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. And yeah, everybody, yeah, I saw that was very
Well,
sad. Yep.
yeah. I mean, uh, James was around in the early 2000s because I
Okay.
remember when I told the story before, but I remember when I wrote my first article or did my first research with Jess, and this was like 2005, 2006,
Yep.
and he said we've got to get this out, we've got to publish it because at the time James was writing for SitePoint, and he was one of the other people that was writing about accessibility stuff. And
Right, right.
then and I got to know I know that he worked for Carl with and talked about how good he was um, for Carl's for the role that Carl had him in, which was doing access. He was looking after accessibility audits and doing QA and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. But then he came to work for. He was really a technical writer. That's his main. But he's also
Okay.
he had so many feathers in his cap. But
Right.
I managed him for like 3 or 4 years as part of the knowledge center, which was
Okay.
him, Hans, and Ricky, and that's where I did my homeopathic. I
Right.
took on Charlie's management style, but he was a really nice guy, and I have still have the utmost respect for his technical output because he's the sort of he he's the sort of person that you would have said, let's get him on board
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
at
For
the
sure.
time because
I'm just surprised that I don't recognize his name. I know SitePoint
yeah,
and I know some of the works that he has done, but for whatever reason, I missed that opportunity. I
well
missed the
yeah,
opportunity.
I mean and I'd been in contact with him a couple of times since he got diagnosed. He had cancer. Got diagnosed, and yeah, and then he was positive and sanguine about his you know about his own demise. So,
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, it's I like quite a few people. I feel quite sad that he's gone because he was a nice person. He was taken too early, and B that he's just had a really good technical, and he had a good way and a good manner of explaining things, which is rare.
Yep. Yep. Good
So
communicator.
yeah,
Yeah,
unlike
excellent.
myself. Well, I am better. I can communicate. I think I communicate better through the written word than through the orally. But anyway, so yeah. So next up, yeah, is Billy. This is Billy being
Yeah, yeah.
and as we know, Billy's one of the he works at Ubisoft now. He's worked there for a number of years. Well, ever since he left TPG, um, and he's also one of the organisers of XSBTO.
Yep.
And so I look forward to going there because
I
you
got
know
to get
what,
back up there. I got to get back up there. Billy and I have talked a couple of times.
well,
I've
you
kind
should
of
come up and
refrained.
in November
Yeah,
or October.
I will try to make a goal of doing it. In all honesty, and I don't want to necessarily go down this path, but I've kind of shied away from it because of some of the angst around my career change, and that kind of happened shortly after the last 11YTO that I was at. But that having been said, I'm not sure that you know this, but Do you know how Billy came to work for TPG?
It was he was working for one of the customers at the time, wasn't
I don't think so. I don't know who he was working for at the time, but I was at CSUN and I was getting ready to be a judge. CSUN used to have this challenge, disability challenge, technology challenge, and I was on the judging team along with Jennison Asuncion.
he? Hmm.
And Jennison came and brought, now maybe Billy worked for TD Bank. I don't know where Jennison was, or not TD Bank. What was the other big bank that he was up there with? Either way, Jennison brought him and he said, Mike, this is Billy Gregory. You really need to hire him. He'll be perfect for TPG. Billy and I talked. We had a good discussion, and I think within a month or two after that, I made him an offer and he came on board.
And
Never looked back.
it was yeah, it was a good move. And
Yeah, yeah.
that yeah, well, I mean, as far as accessibility TO is concerned, it's one of my go-to conferences. I mean, working from home, it's just nice to be out and to go someplace
I hear
different.
you.
And I love going to accessibility conference or conferences in general, but accessibility conferences, not so much for the actual formal presentations, but just be able to connect with people.
The
And
networking is awesome, and that's one of the best places to do it.
yeah,
Yep,
so
I agree.
I'm going to be there. Well, I'm planning to go
In
this year
November?
again. October it is. Um, so what I'm actually Billy and I are sort of working on a nascent idea of having an event there, like a social event where we do fireside shorts, where we just have people come up and they talk about 10 minutes,
Yep.
more in the line of, I don't know whether you were around at TPG when I started the fireside chats, because it was at the time when we were getting more and more people. So we're having a large amount, we're having a large influx of people that and we didn't know each other.
Yeah.
And working remotely, it's difficult. So I started doing this thing where daily I'd get people to answer a few questions and provide a photo, and I'd put it up on well, I think it started on Skype and then moved to Teams.
Yeah,
But
that must have been after me. I left in 2019. So it was probably after that. And again,
yeah,
I was all in on taking care of Kim at that time. So
yeah,
I probably was pretty much disconnected. Tom Tiernan was probably still a CEO. Yeah, he was still a CEO then. So yeah.
yeah, another blast from the past. But funnily enough, when I was speaking to Jared the other day, and then after that, we were talking about Claudia Case, and you probably remember.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she retired about 2010, but then I got contacted. Well, I think I got contacted by this guy called Kevin Kalahiki, who used
I
to
know
work
Kevin
for.
very well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
hadn't
we, we
heard
met
from
him at
him
Wells Fargo.
for years, yes. And he used to be, he worked Wells
Yep,
Fargo for years. And I met him then because I remember actually going, I was, TPG sent me to do some training in San Francisco.
yep. Yes,
And
right,
yeah,
exactly.
I remember meeting him there. And I think of it, oh, no, well, I didn't meet Gerard there, but I met Gerard on many occasions since. But yeah, but he was at the
Yeah,
same
Gerard,
time.
that's right. Gerard was at Wells Fargo, but I think years after Kevin,
No, I think they were there.
they
I
were there
think they
together.
did cross over, but
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I mean,
I didn't know. I didn't know that. I knew that they both came there, but later on, Kevin went. Where did Kevin go? He went to he went to Capital One. He went to
right.
Capital One, called me up, called me and Larry Goldberg, and we did a basically a fireside chat session at South by Southwest together with
Nice.
Kevin. It was awesome. It was great. I had a fun time.
You did some chats for We're Able TV at CSUN as well, didn't you?
Oh, of course, yeah, yeah. We
Yeah,
did all
I
kinds of things
remember
there. Yeah,
being hauled up for one was with
yeah,
Charlie, I think. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And we did some great, good things there. Yeah. I think it's San Diego. I think it was in San Diego
Yeah,
over down at
yeah.
that time.
In
Yep.
the good old days
Yeah.
of
I'm
San.
looking at that picture of Cedric and Johnny, and it looks like that's in San Diego, but I can't quite tell.
No, I think that that is also at in Orlando
Orlando. Okay. Yeah.
because yeah, I just happened to be looking at that. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Johnny James and Cedric Treverson, both really good people, and yeah, people that have accessibility in their hearts, and I was lucky to work with them.
Yeah. Good
So
people. Really good people. And Billy's the one who brought Johnny in.
yes, yeah, I knew that. Yeah, but I think Johnny wasn't Billy working for like he was working for on some like Obamacare or some he was working for some uh company that was building the some sites for the US government. Yeah.
For TPG or off at his own?
No, he was working for another company.
Oh,
I can't remember. I'll ask him if it,
there was, what was that big, I can't remember the name of that big Canadian company that we did work with. Um, they've got kind of an acronym for for the name. He may have been there. I don't know. Hans did all the lead work on that for us when they were our client, and we worked on the Obamacare sites and the accessibility of it for them. So maybe that is how that. I honestly don't remember. I do remember Jennison coming and introducing Billy to me at CSUN in San Diego and said, "This is a guy you need to hire." And we talked and we did it. And yeah, I mean, actually, that's where I officially hired Hans.
yeah,
Was at CSUN, you know? So CSUN will always remain one of the biggest and closest thing to my heart. You know, this is my last year on the board.
oh really?
Yeah, so this is my last year. So
Well, I
I'm
wanted
all
to,
done.
yeah. I mean, I, obviously, you know why I didn't come and why a
Yeah.
lot of international folk didn't come because
Yep.
it's
Yep.
not feeling. But at the same time, missed out on seeing people. But that's why I want to go to SVTO because
Yeah.
I'm sure that there will be a big
A lot of the same folks will be up there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I get the chance that Adrian lives in Buffalo, and so
Yep. Yep.
he's
Right
always
across the
there.
street.
And I always like to see Adrian and Billy amongst others. Uh, okay, so that's the fireside chat done. So let's oh stop sharing. Okay, we're back. Uh, God, this is working better than it normally does. It's smoother. Something
Oh,
about it
nice.
must be something about your shirt and tie has made me feel more professional. Uh, so tell us a bit about what you've been doing of late, Mike, and
Yeah.
obviously controversial to an extent, and how you view the controversy and what how you've actually if you have made some inroads into to the problem space, so to
Yeah.
speak. I
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. So we're talking about audio I
yep,
and me going over there. So Um, let's see, how do I so the whole overlay thing was just a very, very bad scene. And it was going on 2 or 3 years before I even, thought about coming to Audio Eye. In
yeah,
fact, what a lot of folks may not know, although I know Adrian and Carl do particularly, is that I had been working with the NFB, IAAP, G3ICT, and the Massachusetts Association for the Blind and Learning Disabled, Blind and Visually Impaired. Um, uh, as in the background, I was just doing some consulting with them over this whole problem with what was going on. So first and foremost, um, I had a strong belief, as did many others, leaders in the background who weren't really saying it, but
Mm.
wanted someone to be out there front leading it that not necessarily overlays, but automation and technology had a place in the accessibility life cycle. Okay, the
Mm.
engineering life cycle. And I will always be a technologist at heart. I always believe that there are things that we could do technologically that are better and faster and scale. I've always believed that. Even at TPG, I always did that. For years and years and years, I thought about building a product division of TPG, which we never did. But I always felt that there was some aspect of that I thought would be really useful. So that was going on, and then we had all the accessibility crap that was going on, and UserWay and AudioEye were all involved in the false marketing, right?
Yeah.
So right away, I knew this is a problem that we had to tackle. So the big thing that we did was we got the NFB to sponsor a meeting, host a meeting amongst the key players. All three of those companies, a couple of others, and disability constituencies. Vispero was there, Matt Ader was there, a lot of key players, and it said, look, the whole purpose of that meeting was to bring everybody together and start talking through the issues, hear everybody out. Sassy Outwater, and a close friend of ours, and has since passed away,
Yeah,
was the
unfortunately, yeah.
chair. She was the leader of that, along with Curtis Chong at NFB, and I was the third wheel in that. So we were all working together. So the whole purpose of that was to say, all right, what are the problems? How do we work them out? And we walked away from those meetings. And don't forget, the NFB had just passed their own charter amongst their constituencies about overlays and the demands that they put across the overlay industry. Stop the false advertising, stop the false statements, and acknowledge that the technology has its limitations. We're all on board. We walked away from that meeting. Everybody was on board. Everyone.
Yeah.
Every company, the overlay companies, the disability constituencies, and the AT companies. We had a charter. We walked away, and I said, "Great, mission accomplished. Now we just got to make sure there's follow through." And frankly, there wasn't. There wasn't follow through. And everybody was as far as I was concerned, everybody had a role and everybody had a responsibility, and everybody kind of let things go. Um, so here I am now. I'm working with IAAP. I was able to get the NFB
So
um,
IAAP being the International Association of
accessibility
Accessibility.
professionals,
Yeah.
right? They're the ones that are actually co-host M enabling.
Yeah.
So I
Oh, I
got
didn't realize
them.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So G3ICT and IAAP. That's all where M enabling is working from. So Axel LeBlanc was there, and he was the chair, the president, and in short, approached me and asked me, would I consider bringing this matter to the forefront and get people to talk about it? So I was able to get the NFB and Audio Eye to come and talk in front of the whole audience. And it was a little contentious, and not between the parties, but actually in the audience. It was kind of funny listening to certain people. One person in particular, I just remember him yelling out a couple of things that I thought, "Oh, this is odd," because later on he bought one of those kids bought UserWay. So I thought this is ironic. But anyway, we got it out there, and again, lots of promises, no follow through. I was actually again, remember this is at a time when I'm dealing
So
with him
so what
and
was
working that.
sorry, what was so no follow through. So what were the things that they should have?
Commitments to the number one commitment was to the false advertising, the false marketing, right?
Yeah.
A lot of what the fact sheet, the overlay fact sheet talks about,
Yeah.
commitments to that, commitments to meeting the demands of the NFB. I forget what they call that, but it was the all of the NFB members voted for and said, "Here's our charter. This is what we demand." So there was commitments at that level by the overlay companies in particular. Okay, but there was also a commitment from the AT and the disability constituencies to work with these organizations and help them. And so there was a lot of. It looked to me like things that were going to happen. Um, so those are the two big commitments. The technology wasn't doing what they claimed it could do, and the technology was an interference to assistive technologies as a whole.
Mm.
And we're needed. They're just kind of a waste of time, right? So we all know that. I knew all this. Then Accessibility started trying to recruit me. Then UseAway tried to recruit me, and then AudioEye said all three of them were recruiting me to come in there because they knew they just didn't they had no one inside their companies that had any cachet, if you will,
Yeah.
with with our community of professionals. Plain and simple. They just didn't have it. No one believed them. Why would you? They lied all the time. So why would you?
Yeah.
Um, so long story short, after a conversation with Ty Demore, who I knew Ty from the very early days of AudioEye when it was basically like a read out loud type of interface. And he was a college student somewhere in Pennsylvania, I forget where it was. Um, and so I just knew him, and he approached me on a personal level and said, "We need your help. Could you come? Would you come?" And so I thought, look, I've been unsuccessful working on the outside. I was. I just
Yeah.
no one was meeting the demands. And I worked for 2.5 years with Sassy and Curtis to convince these people, and no one would do it. So I thought, I'll take a risk. What will happen if I take a risk of going inside a company? And I had specific demands about what that risk would do and what it would mean. And the founder, the main, the CEO of the company investor agreed to those terms. And those terms were as simple as this. First of all, stop all the false marketing. Got to put it into it. Number two, we need to become part of this community of people with disabilities. So we need to hire people with disabilities to work on our technologies here to make sure that they meet compliance. Eat our own dog food.
Mm.
Okay. Secondly, we need to be involved with the professional society. We need to work with them. So that means we need to start going to the CSUNs and the other conferences and work with them as colleagues and listen. So get agreement on that, and then those are the two big things that I think I really work. Oh, and then the other part is AudioEye had an overlay widget, right, that they built into their platform. Now, the biggest part of their platform did not count on those, didn't even rely on hardly anything related to those widgets, but they still had it. And I said, either get rid of it or reclassify it. Okay. Stop saying it's a tool to help people with disabilities. And if you want, say it's something that maybe the elderly generation could use because they don't know how to configure their browsers or configure their operating systems, right? So do that, and we'll call it a personalization tool. And they did that, they committed to that, and on top of it, they built a help desk front end to it so that people with disabilities could file bugs wherever it was. So they committed to doing all those things. There were a lot of other things I have helped them do or asked them to do that they've been pretty good about doing. And so that's why I took the job, knowing, as many of my close friends, including my own son, saying, "Dad, this is not good. You're going to get killed." And I said, so my reasoning was this. Um, I'm at the end of my career and I knew it. If if I'm going to do one more good thing, maybe I could get everybody to be together and maybe I could bring the two sides together, and then we can do what I'd always wanted to do, was say technology is an important tool as part of our engineering life cycle for accessibility. And all of these tools will work and help in one form or another. We're never going to be able to replace the human element, either
Mm.
from a user testing standpoint or from the expertise and the expert consulting. But one thing I do know is we are losing the battle. We are losing the battle. Doesn't matter whether we try to get them to enhance the source code, or they're not doing it, and they're doing it even less as the WebAIM, the latest version of the
Yeah.
WebAIM, right? It's gone from 95, 90, now it's up at 97 point something, right? And so it proves that we're not scaling. We've got to give these businesses and these organizations an easier way to tackle it, maybe from a prioritization standpoint. And if tools will do that, if AI and automation will do that, I'm in on that. It's just we need to make sure that we're saying the right things strategically and that the organizations that we're working with, the customers, understand how the real process works. So, by and large, that's what I'm doing, to this day. Now, I've got a couple of other projects that I've really been much more focused on at the Title II, ADA Title II aspect and what's going on in California, the AB 2190 activity. So I've been really, really focused on that. But again, my position is always on behalf of people with disabilities. That has never changed, ever, ever changed. Accessibility and usability has never changed. I've always spoken the truth, always stayed on the same soapbox. I think people misunderstood my intent and didn't understand it. And, so I took my lumps. I took uh
Yeah.
I took
Well,
some
I mean,
hits, some heavy hits.
I think when you told me that you were going to go and work there or mention it to me, I said to you, not something I would do, but I also think at the same time, if anybody is going to improve the situation or bring people together, it's going to be you.
People kept telling me that, Stephen. I don't know whether it's true or not. I certainly think that there are a lot of colleagues much more qualified to do this than myself. I think Mike Shabanek, Larry Goldberg. I think of those, folks who are leaders at that level, really understand it, are better people than myself, that could have done that.
Yeah,
But
nobody else willing to actually put
that's what it
themselves
came
on the
down to.
line because
I
it's,
just
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're 100% right. And I talked with both of them and a few other people, and no one would do it. Um,
So have you seen any softening of attitudes towards your current work, or is it over time?
yeah, for sure. That first 2 years, well, I've only been at AudioEye for 2.5 years. The first year and a half to two were really rough. A lot of good friends who to this day, I love and respect and have worked with. They took it pretty hard, but many others have since come forward with talking. And in this past year in particular, I've seen, um, yeah, some more handshaking
Well,
and friendly faces and
I'm
smiling.
pleased to hear that
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I mean, irregardless, my thought is, that most people work for large corporations who do bad things all the time.
yeah.
But I think it was, there was the overlays, and I still don't agree with the concept of them, and I think it's not the way
As
to
neither
do
do
it.
I. Neither do
Yeah,
I. Yeah, the overlay and the widget thing, I don't. But there's a layer that these automation platforms that people that at the architectural and development level, they are an overlay. But there are a lot of other things out there that we don't think about it. Browsers are an overlay when you think
yeah.
about it, right? The web is an overlay on top of the internet when you think about it. They act as interpreters for or rendering interfaces for something else. But the overlay widget started with the right. I think people had an initial goal of just trying to improve things for people with disabilities, but they just went about it the wrong way. And not only that, they left the key people who could really help them understand where they were going wrong out of it. They just
Yeah.
didn't communicate it. They just bullheaded their
It
way
just,
through it.
yeah, I think part of it is that there seem to be like a lot of grifters
Yeah, exactly.
involved, and marketing and stuff like that. I mean, and to be honest, I don't know if that has changed overall. It's interesting because you don't hear so much about Userway anymore since were bought by Level
Level
8.
access. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Lionel's still there. The rest of them, I don't really know what's happened. I talked to Lionel because we worked on something else at the W3C, one of the community working groups. You
yeah.
probably know that. Um, so he's still there. Um, He's an interesting individual. As you know, I introduced him to you. He doesn't listen well. But
Yeah.
and if he
I,
watches this, he'll know, Lionel, I have a lot of respect for you and some of your thoughts and ideas like that. But you gotta listen better, man. You gotta be more empathic to the community. And I
yeah.
think he's trying. He's trying.
Well, I'm sure he's tried, but I know, yeah, that he hasn't ingratiated himself with
No.
with some people. I mean, I
Yeah.
know that he works closely with Yanina Sanchez,
Yes. Yeah.
who
Yep.
who's I've got a lot of respect for Yanina. Just she's just a force. I mean, she just seems to ever continue to to be energetic and um, productive within the whatever group she is.
She's
She's
amazing too. Yanina and I have known each other since the maybe late 80s, early 90s. That's how far it goes back. Was
yeah,
when George Kirscher and I created ICAD, Yanina was there at those original meetings. So we go back that far. And she was on the not Unix, Linux teams,
yep.
development teams. And I went back and Rich Shortfigure was leading that activity. I work with her. I would like to see Yanina, Leone, and Judy Brewer in the same room, right? And I just let the three of them. I want to see how that conversation,
Well,
yeah,
I'm sure
evolved.
well, Leonie being she's WebEx work group chair, but she's also chair of currently the chair of the executive committee
I
of it.
know, I know.
So I'm sure, and Unique is still very active. She's chair of
She's
the
the
APA.
architectural.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what is it? Um, Accessibility platforms architecture.
Right. That's it.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
with Matthew, another alumni of TPG.
Remind me of something I want to ask you just before we go, just because of that conversation. But I'll something that she said to me that shocked me, and I didn't realize this, and so I wrote a paper on it, doing a little some research, and I'm still really troubled by the whole thing. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, you
I
piqued
let the
my
cat.
interest
So
now.
yeah, so I really have always wanted to go to TPAC, and I never have, for
Yeah,
various reasons. I've never been able to go.
well, it's in
But
Dublin this year.
oh man, I should try to. Is it September again?
No, November.
November? Maybe I will.
After accessibility TO.
So I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much, but so Yanita told me that there was a conversation going on about automation, AI, accessibility in at the TPAC meetings, and I will talk about the people that she mentioned who made the statement. All this stuff can be done by the browsers.
I,
All this stuff, all of this stuff can be done by the browsers. And I said, whoa, 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 whoa.
there is one person
Is that true?
yeah, that talks about smart browsers and basically saying that, all the guidelines will, or much of the guidelines will be, sort of,
Irrelevant,
yeah,
because all this can be done at the
yeah,
browser level or by the browsers.
yeah.
So I just literally, she just told me this a couple of months ago, and I had no clue. I honestly had no
Oh,
clue.
good.
Maybe
Well, we can have a conversation about it offline.
we should.
Yeah,
I'll send you
yeah.
my paper. I'll
Oh,
send you
please
my
do,
paper.
please
I
do.
wrote the paper which proves 100% whoever made that statement is absolutely right. And my simple question is, why haven't they? And that paper answers that question. It
Yeah,
does. Straightforward. I'll send it to you. So I'm going to send you a couple things. I'll send you the browser paper. Just keep it to yourself right now.
sure, sure.
Browser paper. And what was the other thing? Oh, the history of way link.
Yeah. And
Yep.
any other I always remember, I don't know if you still got it, I always remember the letter that you got from, was it President Clinton?
Oh yeah, I got that letter. I got one
Yeah,
from Bill. I got one from
because
him. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
remember
Bill Gates.
we had it published on the
Yeah.
TVG site yeah, back
I
in
have people
the
come up to me and say, "Do you remember who got that meeting organized at the White House?" I said, "Yeah, it was me."
yeah.
Greg Vanderheiden came up to me not long ago. I said, "Was it you?" By the way, I have shown this paper to Greg, And Greg is to me still one of the most respected minds in this business. He reviewed it. He couldn't believe it. He said, yeah, you're spot on." So I think I'm onto something, but the problem is I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make this elephant dance. So before I go any further, I'm actually gonna have a couple of people that I know are in much higher places in the companies that own the browsers and ask them to tell me that my theory is wrong.
Well, that's the best way. I mean,
Hypothesis.
you propose something and you get people to feedback on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it's always good to do it out in the public, hopefully as well, because you know
If this is
sunlight is the
really
best
true,
disinfectant, so to speak.
yeah, if this is really true, Steve, I'm aggravated. I wasted 30 years. We wasted 30 years. If all this stuff could have been done through the
I'll be
browsers all
interested.
along,
I'll be just to read it.
I will send it to you. I've got another meeting. Well, I'm already late for it, but that's okay. It's not critical. I'll send it to you after I finish um, my next meeting.
Well, we've been speaking for over an hour and a half now, so it's probably we could continue speaking for um well, we could go for hours and hours, but we
Yeah.
won't because I've got the dinners on the way,
Yeah.
etc. But thank you, Mike. It's been wonderful to catch up with you, and I think that we should get you on again at some point. I will get you on again at some point.
You know how to reach me, buddy. You know how to
Yeah,
reach me.
and as always, thank I've said it previously. I said I wouldn't be in the position I am now without your help and Deb's help and Charlie's.
Well, we love you, man, and
Yeah,
I think
likewise.
all of us are better persons, and the world from accessibility is better because of the likes of you and our entire TPG
Thank you.
team,
Yeah,
including Deb
yeah,
and Deb's,
definitely.
and yeah,
I mean,
without a doubt.
and I think it's just people trying to do the right thing
Yeah,
for the
yep,
right reasons.
yeah, yeah. Always remember, it's okay to make mistakes. It's
Oh, of
okay to make
course.
mistakes, right? Just work with it, talk, communicate, be empathic, and keep your heart in the right place, and we'll get through this.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Steve.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, buddy.
Bye bye.
See you later.